real sellout now. Man, rising. See, I am you messing with you too. He fought everybody. Then we got the intro music playing on the other side. All right, y'all about ready?
Grand Rising. Hope everyone's
Peace,
doing
y'all.
well.
Peace.
Did everybody have a good day yesterday?
Hopefully, hopefully all is well. All is well. Let's say today we'll basically be starting off with the American Revolutionary War, finishing the Indian Wars, basically.
Supposedly.
And this is Cab calling Aboriginal bloodlines. Let me pull the room up to see who all we got in here. Other screen finally came in, so now I don't have to put everything on one. Grand Rising, I am Flying Squirrel. Let's say first one to fly in the building.
Really flying to the building. Okay.
First to land. All right.
First to
First
land,
to
first to
land.
land. My people coming in, I'm finna share it, send it out. Cause some days YouTube just act like it don't want to do alerts. Man, notification ain't no notifications for you. You've been notified. We ain't gonna let you share it.
Wow. It's not like that, is it?
I ain't. I don't even share the Facebook like I used to no more. Got tired of them banning me every other day. I'm like, hold on, I just shared a news story.
Ah, but what kind of news story though? So
Yeah. See, I never read the small print. They got me. They got me.
you can read? Shame on you.
And you know we can't say that too loud. You got some
You
people.
just ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Some people running around here like it's still the 1600s.
I mean, with some of the actions, with some of the shenanigans we be taking part in, I could see how that could be applicable.
Yeah, very possible. So
Well,
no.
one thing I would like to clear up is, I'm
Hmm.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
one thing I would like to, yeah, one thing I would like to clear up is that with all these tribes that we're discovering that are doing these, let's call them backdoor deals and creating their own treaties and agreements, we must remember and take into account just because the tribe is listed, and you'll see how tribes split off, and some may have went with the French, and some may have went with Spain, and some may have with England and Great Britain. Doesn't mean all of them did. So we must remember there's always going to be a remnant that didn't choose to side with the colonizers. Because if they did choose to side with the colonizers, we wouldn't be here. So we must keep that in mind. That not all the Indians decided to, I guess,
I gotta answer
do
something
the
real
bad
quick.
thing or stay on the bad side. So just keep that in mind. And again, we are not by any stretch of the imagination saying that Europeans are free from responsibility. But what we are saying is until we take the responsibility for our ancestors' part, we're going to be forever repeating the cycle. And I don't know about you, but that is not something that I want to do, nor do I want my family to be continue to be burdened with. So we got to get it right this time. We got to get on code. We got to make sure that we do what we're supposed to do. We got to take responsibility, work together, get back to our tribes, help our tribes, and help each other. Well, for those that want to be helped, because not everybody wants to be helped. So, got anything that you want to say? No, so out.
I'm over here agreeing with you on mute. Actually, appreciate that. Not everybody
All
wants to
right,
be helped, but we're here if you need us.
right. Not everybody's going to agree with us, and that's the beautiful thing about where we live. You know, we can agree to disagree as long as we
Keep it
don't
cordial
become disagreeable.
and keep it.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So that's pretty much it. So just remember that there's always going to be a remnant of all these Indian tribes that did not agree with the Europeans.
Hmm.
And this is not a situation where we what you call it, we snitching or tattletelling, because I don't know about if y'all know about the snitching rule, but snitching only takes effect is if we're doing a crime together. I get caught, you get away, and I tell on you. That's
Hmm.
snitching.
Wrong is
But if I
wrong.
see you doing something you ain't got right, if I see you doing something you ain't got no business, and I want part of it, that ain't snitching. That's just doing what's right.
Hmm.
So so I say it to say, if you ever around me, you doing something you ain't got no business, oh, I'm telling. Not only am I telling, but if I can't, I'm gonna stop you. So just know that. All right, I'm off my soapbox.
So no sellout. How was your evening yesterday? I haven't got the chance to really sit down and
Man,
chop it up with you.
yeah, no, it's probably because I was catching up on sleep.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, definitely passed out early. Passed out a little early after cutting the grass and everything. But yeah, it was still great. Still love. I woke up this morning, this rising. So
Mm.
yeah. How about yourself? What was you doing last night? That's all I want. I know you
Videos,
had
videos, and more
some things.
videos.
Yep, there you go. Man.
Yeah, that's how it went. Any one of you got the chance to watch the upload History of the Cherokee
Hmm.
last night? What you
Yes,
thought
sir.
about it? Pretty decent?
I liked it. I definitely liked it. Yeah,
Well,
I liked it was a little longer too.
yeah, we got one for basically for every tribe. We'll have one being posted every night for every tribe.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
just brief history and information. Don't take it as the end all. It's basic information for people who's researching on different tribes and stuff to have things to basic knowledge and time periods and timelines to
Exactly.
study.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Don't treat
It's
everything
necessary
as
too.
yeah. Don't treat everything as factual that you hear, but also listen to it and research on it. It'll give you points and
Thanks.
references.
Little study guide.
Yeah.
And also, too, people got to understand that the Cherokee was not only a tribe; they were a nation
Mhm.
of many different tribes, and then they were a confederation.
Mhm.
Mm.
So, depending on what time frame you're talking about, will depend on which Cherokee you're
You're
talking about.
talking about yes.
Because if you're talking about the Cherokee that moved to the west during the Trail of Tears, now you're talking an amalgamation of many tribes.
Mhm.
And before that, you could be talking about, tribes up under the Cherokee Nation where there could have been some Sioux involved or some Choctaw involved. So
Yeah.
just keep in mind when they say Cherokee, there could be a different combination depending on what time frame it references.
Mhm.
And just wanted to put that out there.
All facts. Okay, loading this in. So we said so far we done got up. We left off yesterday's show with the Lord Dunmar's War, and today we pick off with we start off with the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. Very interesting. It says on one side we have the United States, France, Spain, Vermont, Netherlands, Mysore, what's that? Wandia, Tuscarora, Watauga Association, Catawba, Lenape, Choctaw. Now in corner two, we have Great Britain, we have the Loyalists, we have the German auxiliaries, we have the Iroquois, the Onondaga or Onondaga, the Mohawk, what's that? The Cayuga, Seneca, and Cherokee. And the outcome of this states the Treaty of Paris. Britain recognizes the independence of the United States of America, end of the first British Empire.
So if you think about it, it's like the Justice League versus the Legion of Doom,
Basically.
or Marvel versus DC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Sound like one of the oldest stories being told over and over.
yeah,
Just
no, right.
just posted the link to where we're reading from this rising.
Grand Rising Free, Grand Rising Pamela Hall. Good to see y'all ladies on the chat.
Grand
Hope
Risings.
everyone's doing well.
I posted the American Revolutionary War in there. Or that starts. It says the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, also known as the American War of Independence, was an 18th century war between Great Britain and its 13 colonies, allied with France, which declared independence as the United States of America. After 1765, growing philosophical and political differences strained the relationship between Great Britain and its colonies. Patriot protests against taxation without representation followed the Stamp Act and escalated into boycotts, which culminated in 1773 with the Sons of Liberty destroying a shipment of tea in the Boston harbor. Britain responded by closing Boston Harbor and passing a series of punitive measures against the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Massachusetts colonists responded with the Suffolk Resolve, and they established a shadow government which wrestled control of the courtside from the crown. 12 colonies formed the Continental Congress to coordinate their resistance. establishing committees and conventions that effectively seize power. Goes on to state British attempts to disarm the Massachusetts militia in Concord led to open combat on April 19th, 1775. Militia forces then besieged Boston, forcing a British evacuation in March 1776, and Congress appointed George Washington to command the Continental Army. Concurrently, the Americans failed decisively in an attempt to invade Quebec and raise insurrection against the British. On July 2nd, 1776, the Second Continental Congress voted for independence. Issuing its declaration on July 4th, Sir William Howe launched a British counteroffensive, capturing New York City and at a low ebb, leaving America morale at a low ebb. However, victories at Trenton and Princeton restored American confidence in 1777. The British launched an invasion from Quebec under John Bourguignon, intending to isolate the New England colonies. Instead of assisting this effort, Howe took his army on a separate campaign against Philadelphia, and what's his name, Bourguignon was decisively defeated at Saratoga in October 1777. Says his defeat had drastic consequences. France formally allied with the Americans and entered the war in 1778, and Spain joined the war fought the following year as an ally of France, but not as an ally of the United States. In
Whoa,
1780,
stop, stop, stop,
want
stop,
me to
stop,
read it
stop.
again?
Yeah, read that because I think that's important. The way
hmm
they break that down like that. Go
Cool.
ahead.
France formally allied with the Americans and entered the war in 1778. And Spain joined the war the following year as an ally of France, but not as an ally of the United States.
How is that possible?
Hmm. Spain still had some bad blood between the
So
so-called
were they?
U.S.
So were they only fighting where France was fighting,
That's what it
or
sounds like
only
to me.
helping France maintain the territories that they had gained during the war? That's
Yep.
interesting. Let's keep that in the back of our minds. So, go
hmm
ahead, Bones.
In 1780, the kingdom of Mysore attacked the British in India, and tensions between Great Britain and the Netherlands erupted into open war. In North America, the British mounted a southern strategy led by Charles Cornwallis, which hinged upon a loyalist uprising, but too few came forward. Cornwallis suffered reversals at the King's Mountain and Cowpens. He retreated to Yorktown, Virginia, intending an evacuation, but a decisive French naval victory deprived him of an escape. A Franco-American led army by the Comte de, I'm going to get his last name right,
I think it's
Rochambeau,
Rochambeau.
Rochambeau,
Rochambeau. I think that's how it's.
and
Yeah.
Washington then beside Cornwall's army. And with no sign of relief, he surrendered in October 1781. Whigs in Britain had long opposed the pro-war Tories in Parliament, and the surrender gave them the upper hand in early 1782. Parliament voted to end all offensive operations in America, but the war continued overseas. Britain remained under siege in Gibraltar, but scored a major victory over the French Navy. On September 3rd, 1783, the belligerent parties signed the Treaty of Paris, in which Great Britain agreed to recognize the sovereignty of the United States and formally end the war. French involvement had proven decisive, but France made few gains and incurred crippling debts. Spain made some excuse me. Spain made some territorial gains but failed in its primary aim of recovering Gibraltar. The Dutch were defeated on all counts and were compelled to cede territory to Great Britain. In India, the war against Mysore and its allies concluded in 1784 without any territory changes. Hmm.
So you see where it says that the Dutch were defeated on all counts and were compelled to cede territory to Great Britain.
Yeah.
So is that saying that the Dutch also were fighting with Spain and France
Yeah.
with America?
Well, the Dutch would have to fight with Spain because Spanish and Portuguese are Dutch. It would only make
Got it.
sense. And the more and more we read about this, the war that they told you never happened. By reading that little small part there, Britain got jumped. That's how. That's why they left the colonies alone. Because with Dutch, Spain, France, everybody fighting Britain over there on that side, there was no way they can fight a war on that side and this side. Sort of like the 7 Year War, what happened
And also explain why they were able to retreat to the west, because at that time when they retreated, it was mostly Spanish and French held territory.
out there, yeah. Sort of allowed them to move out there because they were making deals with them. Well, we already know this, so.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. It goes on to say Parliament passed the Stamp Act in 1765 to pay for British military troops stationed in the American colonies after the French and Indian War. Hold on. Parliament passed the Stamp Act in 1765 to pay for British military troops stationed in the American colonies after the French and Indian War. Finna open up the Stamp Act real quick. Post this in the chat so if anyone are interested in getting it. It's the Stamp Act of 1765. Okay, the Stamp Act of 1765 was an act of the Parliament of Great Britain that imposed a direct tax on the British colonies and plantations in America. It required that many printed materials in the colonies be produced on stamped paper produced in London, carrying an embossed revenue stamp. Printed materials included legal documents, magazines, playing cards, newspapers, and many other types of paper used throughout the colonies. Like previous taxes, the stamp tax had to be paid in valid British currency, not in colonial paper money. The purpose of the tax was to pay for British military troops stationed in the American colonies after the French and Indian War, which was the North American theater of the Seven Years' War. However, the colonists had never feared a French invasion to begin with, and they contended that they had already paid their share of the war expenses. They suggested that it was actually a matter of British excuse me, actually a matter of British patronage to surplus British officers and career soldiers who should be paid by London. The Stamp Act was very unpopular among colonists. A majority considered it a violation of their rights as Englishmen to be taxed without their consent that only the colonial legislator could grant. Their slogan was no taxation without representation. Colonial assemblies sent petitions and protests, and the Stamp Act Congress held in New York was the first significant joint colonial response to any British measure when it petitioned Parliament and the King. Goes on to state one member of the British Parliament argued that the colonies were no different from the 90% residents of the Great Britain who did not own property and thus could not vote. I'm going to read this again. One member of the British Parliament argued that the colonies were no different from the 90% residents of Great Britain who did not own property and thus could not vote, but who were nonetheless virtually represented by land owning electors and representatives who had common interests with them. An American attorney refuted this by pointing out that the relations between the Americans and the English electors were a not too infirm to be relied on for proper representation, virtually or otherwise. Local protest groups established committees of correspondence, which created a loose coalition from New England to Maryland. Protests and demonstrations increased, often initiated by the Sons of Liberty, and occasionally involving hanging of effigies. Very soon, all stamp tax distributors were intimidated into resigning their commission, and the tax was never effectively collected. Opposition to the Stamp Act was not limited to the colonies. British merchants and manufacturers pressured Parliament because their exports to the colonies were threatened by boycotts. The act was repealed on the 18th of March 1766 as a matter of expedience, expedience, but Parliament affirmed its power to legislate for the colonies in all cases whosoever, while also passing the Declaratory Act. A series of new taxes and regulations then ensued, likewise opposed by the colonists. The episode played a major role in defining the 27 colonial grievances that were clearly stated within the text of the indictment of George III, section of the United States Declaration of Independence, enabling the organized colonial resistance that led to the American Revolution in 1775.
Okay, so for those of you who are just joining, and it sounds like we're reading you a history lesson, we are. This is talking about the American Revolution, but this is just more than the 13 colonies going up against Great Britain. There are a number of Indian tribes that are involved, and some of those tribes would include the Oneida, the Tuscarora, the Watauga Association, the Catawba, the Lenape, and the Choctaw. These are fighting on the fighting with with the United States, and then those tribes that are fighting with Great Britain are the Iroquois, the Onaga, the Mohawk, the Cayuga, and the Seneca and Cherokee tribe. So what we're doing now is we're just recapping how the American Revolution War started. You have Great Britain against the United States, and then 2 years out into the war, France got involved, and they brought Spain into the war. But Spain only sided with France, but they did not side with the Americans. So now we're talking about how the Stamp Act was introduced, and which caused the war. And the Stamp Act talks about the British Parliament argued that the colonials were no different from the 90% residents of the Great Britain who did not own property and thus could not vote. So basically showing that there was only a small representation of Virginia colonies who actually owned their property, because at this time they were still, for lack of term, sharecropping, and some were still marrying and mingling with the Indian tribes. So I just wanted to catch everybody up. So I'm sorry, Bones. Go ahead, bro.
No problem. Yeah, that was just reading into the Stamp Act. Yeah, but it seems like to me the part is there were soldiers still left here. Cause remember I kept asking the question, where did the British soldiers and stuff come from for like a
Mm-hmm.
couple of these wars? They were left here from the French and Indian War. It states they were
Right.
already stationed here, and when they be talking about taxes and the history back in school, now you get to find out what taxes it was they were really complaining about. That they were being made to pay taxes for the soldiers, basically room and board. Because you see that in some movies where you have British soldiers living in certain colonial homes, coming in, taking certain food and rations and stuff. Just putting it all in perspective.
Do you think we should cover the Declaratory Act, which
Yeah,
is what happened after the Stamp Act got repealed?
yeah, we can, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the back chat. I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll go ahead and put it in the back chat. That way you'll have it. So again, we're going west before we can go north and south. Going
Hmm.
lateral. Um, the American Colonies Act of 1766, commonly known as the Declaratory Act, was an act of the Parliament of Great Britain which accompanied the repeal of the Stamp Act and the changing and lessening of the Sugar Act. Oh my gosh. Parliament repealed the Stamp Act because boycotts were hurting British trade, and used the Declaration to justify the repeal and save face. The Declaration stated that Parliament's authority was the same in America as in Britain, and asserted Parliament's authority to pass laws that were binding on the American colonies. The background to that is representatives from the number of the 13 colonies assembled as the Stamp Act Congress in response to the Stamp Act in 1765 to call into question the right of a distant power to tax them without proper representation. The British Parliament was then faced with the colonies who refused to comply with the act. This combined with the protests that had occurred in the colonies, and perhaps more importantly, protests which had arisen in Great Britain from manufacturers who were suffering from the colony's non importation agreement, all led to the repeal of the Stamp Act. Normally, the economic activity in the colonies would not have caused such an outcry, but the British economy was still experiencing a post war depression from the Seven Years' War. Remember, after this war had happened, because the 7 Years' War didn't just happen in the United States, it happened on like two other continents. Another reason for the repeal of the Stamp Act was the replacement of George Grenville, the prime minister who had enacted the Stamp Act, by Charles Watson Wentworth, second Marquis of Rockingham. Rockingham was more favorable towards the colonies, and furthermore, he was agnostic towards policies that Grenville had enacted. Rockingham invited Benjamin Franklin to speak to Parliament about colonial policy, and he portrayed the colonies as opposition to the internal taxes, which were derived from internal colonial transactions such as the Stamp Act, called for but not external taxes, which are duties laid on important commodities. Parliament then agreed to repeal the Stamp Act on the condition that the Declaratory Act was passed. On March 18, 1766, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act and passed the Declaratory Act. The Declaratory Act proclaimed that Parliament hath and of right ought to have full power and authority to make laws and statutes of sufficient force and validate and validity to bind the colonies and people of America in all cases whatsoever. The phrasing of the act was intentionally unambiguous. In other words, the Declaratory Act of 1766 asserted that Parliament had the absolute power to make laws and changes to the colonial government in all cases whatsoever, even though the colonists were not represented in Parliament. So now you see why this act was so controversial. And
Mm-hmm.
we also see that Benjamin Franklin, who is acting on behalf of the United States as a diplomat, was in Britain, um, politicking and expressing the United States, oh, the colonies' discontent with the new law. You got to realize whenever you're in partnership or there's a treaty with a foreign country or foreign entity, it's always important to have your representative or your diplomat there,
Yep.
living there amongst the people, so there's some type of common tie. Because if not, then how are they going to know what your grievances are, and how is there ever going to be any type of treaty when there's no one there to speak on your behalf?
Live representation.
So
I'm just
that was the
looking at
Declaratory Act.
I'm looking at all these theaters and acts. Sounding like Shakespeare's to me.
Yeah, definitely sounds that way.
You got
Because you think about it, you have Great Britain, who was originally England before they came into power in 1744,
mm-hmm.
come late to the party. They like the person that comes to the party after the fact, and then they want to eat up all the food and hog up everything.
Mm-hmm.
They want to start adding the taxes because you got to realize the French and the Spanish were dealing with these tribes for hundreds of years before England even got here.
Mm-hmm.
So you understand their discontent and their utter, I would dare say, disdain for England, who then became Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
So they were not too happy, but because the 13 colonies were actually on the property on the continent with France and Spain, they developed a rapport, they developed a relationship. It's going to be interesting to find out why Spain's and United and the 13 colonies relationship was such that Spain would help France but wouldn't help the 13 colonies. But I'm sure we'll find all that out.
Yep.
So where you want to go from there, Bones?
We can go back into the Revolutionary War. Since people
All
got
right.
brief information on them two acts real quick. Unless we're going trying to think, does the Sugar Act take them? Unless we're gonna go into the Sugar Act to give them a brief.
Yeah, we might as well because it's like all these acts start to reveal more and more about the who, what, when, and why things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're dealing with how these tribes got entangled and started developing treaties with the Europeans, and we must remember that when we talk about Europe, we're talking about France, Spain, and Great Britain. They're not separate. This one landmass. You're just dealing with basically three individual countries on the same continent. It's no different than North America, Central America, and South America, to make it simple. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this the Sugar Act in the chat so people can read and catch up with it. All right. The Sugar Act, also known as the American Revenue Act or the American Duties Act, was a revenue raising act. So we know right here it was an attempt by Parliament of Great Britain to generate additional funds. On 5 April 1764, the preamble to the act stated, "It is expedient that new provisions and regulations should be established for improving the revenue of this kingdom, and it is just and necessary that a revenue should be raised for defraying the expenses of defeating, protecting, and securing the same." The earlier Molasses Act, which is probably the same as the Sugar Act, because we're talking about commodities, of 1733, which had imposed a tax on 6 pence per gallon of molasses, had never been effectively collected due to colonial invasion. By reducing the rate by half and increasing measures to enforce the tax, the British hoped that the tax would actually be collected. These incidents increased the colonists' concerns about the intent of the British Parliament and helped growing movement that became the American Revolution. You remember how I was talking about one tribe was very instrumental in encouraging the Revolutionary War, encouraging the 13 colonies? I can't remember which tribe it was, but I'm sure it will come up. But there was a Indian tribe that was pretty much suggesting that the 13 colonies rebel against Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a little information on the Molasses Act. The Molasses Act of 1733 was passed by Parliament largely at the instance of large plantation owners in the British West Indies. Molasses from French, Dutch, and Spanish West Indian possession was inexpensive. Sugar from the British West Indies was priced much higher than its competitors, and they also had no need for the large quantities of lumber, fish, and other items offered by the colonies in exchange. Sometimes colonists would pay molasses taxes because they were rather low depending on where they resided and how much money they had in the first place. In the first part of the 17th century, the British West Indies were Great Britain's most important trading port. So Parliament was attentive to their requests. However, rather than ascending to the demands to profit to prohibit the colonies from trading with the non-British islands, Parliament passed a prohibitively high tax on the colonies on molasses imported from those islands. If actually collected, the tax would have effectively closed that source to New England and destroyed much of the rum industry. Instead of smuggling, bribery, or intimidation of the customs officials, effectively nullified the law. During the Seven Years' War, known in the colonial America as the French and Indian War, the British government substantially increased the national debt to pay for the war. In February 1763, as the war ended, the ministry headed by John Stuart, the Earl of Bute, decided to maintain a standing army of 10,000 British regular troops in the colonies. Shortly thereafter, George Grenville replaced Bute. Grenville supported his predecessor's policy even more so after the outbreak of Pontiac's Rebellion in May 1763. Grenville faced the problem of not only paying for these troops, but serving their national debt. The debt grew to 75 million pounds before the war, or 122 million pounds in January 1763, and almost 130 million by the beginning of 1764. George Grenville did not expect the colonies to contribute to the interest of the retirement of the debt, but he did expect the Americans to pay a portion of the expenses for the colonial defense. Estimating the expenses of the maintaining the army and the continental colonies of the West Indies to be approximately 200,000 pounds annually. I'm saying pounds because I don't know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Greenville devised a revenue raising program that would raise an estimated 79,000 pounds per year. So to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, this sounds like the Sugar Act was passed for for the islands doing trade with the Americas.
Yep. Can we say a trade embargo?
That's what it sounds like. So you actually have tribes that were on those islands whose family were in America, and there were those some of those islands were owned. Well, it seems like a lot of those islands were owned by Great Britain, but then you
Mm-hmm.
also had some islands that were French owned, Spanish owned. So this goes back to those wars that the Europeans were having amongst themselves and having these Indian tribes fight their wars.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's affecting the trade that our ancestors originally had, which was once impeded before the colonizers got here. So you go from being free to trade as you would like, and then you bring on partners, i.e., the Europeans, and
Facts.
now these partners who you partner with are warring, and now they bring you into their war. So now you're faced as a tribesmen and women, to choose a side based off
Mm-hmm.
of your loyalties and your relationships, thus creating a further division amongst already existing fighting fractions of families and tribes.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like we basically got pulled into their war because we decided to invite them over here.
And be nosy and stop minding our business and minding someone else's.
Hmm. So let me see what the chat has to say. Yeah, Free says the Stamp Act clearly supports what we've been unearthing, who owned the land, etc. Yeah, we own the land. We basically were sharing it because we were friendly, but we didn't realize that we were gonna get pulled into this war. And by the time we got pulled into all these wars with these fighting brothers, because we might as well, because these countries, Europe, France, and Spain, are brothers. So we got involved in the family feud. So our family getting involved with their family caused a greater family fight, which is crazy. And Free says so. The latecomer comes over here and begins imposing taxes on homegrown commodities. Exactly. Did we make our first wrong move in maritime law initially, which allowed them to continue to encroach? It sounds that way, Free. It sounds that way. Because if we were to keep out of water, sorry about that, could not have been done without our help. So now you have different fractions of Indians fighting and taking sides. The Oneida, the Tuscarora, the Watauga Association, the Catawba, the Lenape, the Choctaw, who are fighting with the United States, France, Spain, Vermont, Netherlands, Mysore. Why is Vermont separated from the United States? You see here on this chart, it said it has Vermont separated from the United States. Do you see that, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
Let me read this. It says the Vermont Republic is a 20th century term used to refer to the government of Vermont that existed from 1777 to 1791. In January 1777, delegates from the 28 towns met and declared independence from the jurisdiction and land claims both the British colony in Quebec and the Americas.
Was that
Whew.
like a secession? They seceded for a
It
few years.
sounds like. Let me go. I'm clicking on. I'm reading it because I saw, it, but then I didn't see it. And hold on. The Vermont Republic is a 20th century term used to refer to the government of Vermont that existed from 1777 to 1791. In January 1777, delegates from the 28 towns met and declared independence from the jurisdictions and land claims both the British colony of Quebec and of American states of New Hampshire and New York. They also abolished adult slavery within their boundaries. Many people in Vermont took part in the American Revolution, although the Continental Congress did not recognize the jurisdiction as independent because the vehement objections from New York, which had conflicting property claims, the Continental Congress declined to recognize Vermont, then known as the New Hampshire Grants. Vermont's overtures to join the province of Quebec were accepted by the British, offering generous terms for the Republic's reunion. When the main British army surrendered in 1781, however, American independence became apparent. Vermont, now surrounded on three sides by American territory rejected the British overtures and instead negotiated terms to enter the United States. In 1791, Vermont officially joined the United States as a 14th state. Wow.
Bullied. Locked you in, cut off trade routes and everything. You couldn't get resources, couldn't work with people, so you had no choice but to join.
That's exactly what that sounds like. I was like, why is Vermont separated from.
But look at the year though. How can America form 1776 and states are independent in the 1780s and 1790s? Something wrong here.
Well, you got to realize, you got to realize when he was talking about some of the early wars that predated the Revolutionary War, there were a lot of loyalists that
Mm-hmm.
moved north to Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
Again, even though even though the French and the United States were fighting together, there were certain French people that obviously could not stand the 13 colonies, or they wouldn't have went north to Canada where the French were occupying Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a situation of we don't like each other, but we hate Great Britain more. So we're gonna saddle with one another to get rid of Great Britain, the newcomer, and then we're gonna handle our differences accordingly. That's what it
Mm-hmm.
sounded like to me.
Mm-hmm. Grand Rising Mark Walton. Just going through a little of this American Indian history. Right now we're at the American Revolutionary War. Just going through particular tidbits and reading the acts that go along with it to get a bigger and broader picture.
Yeah, on one side you have the Oneida, the Tuscarora, the Watagua Association, the Catawba, the Lenape, the Choctaw, who are fighting on the side of the United States, France, Spain, Vermont, the Netherlands, and Mysore, and then they're battling Great Britain, the Loyalists, German auxiliaries, the Iroquois Indians, the Ona, Onondagan tribe, the Mohawk tribe, the Cayuga, the Seneca, and the Cherokee tribe. Okay, so you have European brothers fighting Indian brothers because we basically had to pick sides because we had been dealing with these countries for close to 300 years by the time this all happened. So everybody had to pick a side. Everybody fought. Not every Indian of every tribe agreed with either side because there's always going to be a remnant that holds out and disagree, or we wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
So we must always remember that not all of the parties in these tribes agreed with either side. So
Mm-hmm.
there's always going to be a remnant or the remaining party that's like, yeah, I'm not feeling any of this. We just want to get back to our old ways. Y'all do what we do. Y'all do what y'all do. We're gonna do what we do, and then we'll get this figured out. So we're just looking at how our ancestors got dragged into this sibling rivalry that started way before they got here, and I'm starting to realize, and I'm starting to think, or it shows to some extent that the Europeans have always been fighting one another. We saw it when we would go do business when our ancestors were in charge of waterways and just go over there and see those rivalries. But I guess we had no idea how big it was. As you find your tribes and start going into the history of how everything got done and which side your tribes took and why they took sides, I believe you'll find exactly what part they played and why they played that part based off of the exposure that they had. So
Mm-hmm.
remember, finding your tribe will definitely help put these pieces together because we're just reading one side of the story. And remember, there are three sides.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll normally find the truth once you get to the two opposing sides. So that's something to remember. So what do you want to pick up from that, Bones?
Uh, well, basically, I opened up the what's that? The Watagua Association, one of the
Mm-hmm.
tribes that was on the side with France. No, on the side with the United States, France, Spain, Vermont. Uh, Very interesting what it says about them. Let me post it up in the chat before read into it. It's one of the U.S. allies, one of the tribes that allied with the U.S. and a little about their history. Oh, y'all give me a second. I'm posting it in the chat right now.
So while you do that, I'll go ahead and start reading.
All right.
Um, the Watauga Association, sometimes referred to as the Republic of Watauga, was a semi-autonomous government created in 1722 by frontier settlers living along the Watauga River in what is now Elizabethton, Tennessee. Although it lasted only a few years, the Watauga Association provided a basis for what later developed into the state of Tennessee and likely influenced another Western frontier governments in the Trans-Appalachian region. North Carolina annexed the Watauga settlement area, by then known as the Washington District, in November 1776. Within a year, the area was placed under a county government, becoming Washington County, North Carolina. In November 1777, this is the present day Washington County, Carter County, and other areas now located in the northeastern part of the state of Tennessee. So let me stop for a second.
Mm-hmm.
It says the Watauga Association, who was referred to as the Republic of Watauga, was
Mm-hmm.
a semi-autonomous.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
I want to say very interesting.
What? Come on, man.
That's
Hmm.
that's one of your mixed
See
tribes there.
what's.
I bet you they probably like 80% colonial intermarriages are the children of.
Semi-autonomous of a country, state, or community having a degree of but not complete self-government, acting independently to some degree. So you kind of sort of independent.
Mm-hmm.
So are you kind of sort of independent becoming moving towards independence? Or you kind of sort of independent moving towards becoming
But you know it's
consumed by the government that you're trying to be independent from? Go
no,
ahead.
but you know what's very interesting about them was a semi-autonomous government created in 1772. When was the U.S. so-called government put in order? What, 1776, 1777?
Well, that's when it was put in order, but that's not when probably everything was drafted up because you got to realize this was all this stuff was done behind closed doors
Mm-hmm.
because you had to work, you had to deal with loyalists. So they probably had been this probably had been a long time in the making. I would say I would dare say at least a good 6 or 7 years
Yeah,
without the public knowing because you don't want nobody exposing what you're doing.
yeah, because
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
it states, although it lasts only a few years, the Watauga Association provided a base for what later developed into the state of Tennessee and likely influenced other western frontier governments in the Trans-Appalachian region. And they were annexed by North Carolina. So it was a division of North Carolina. See, it's just these
Hmm.
governmental systems.
So it sounds like the the Watauga were a tribe that invited Europeans in, married amongst them, had children amongst them, and then eventually started to move the Watauga people out
Mm-hmm.
and started developing relations and having treaties with the 13 colonies.
Because what it says, while there is no evidence that the Watauga Association ever claimed to be outside the sovereign territory of the British Crown, historians have often cited the association as the earliest attempt by American-born colonists to form an independent democratic government. In 1774, Virginia Governor Lord Dumas called the Watauga Association a dangerous example of Americans forming a government distinct from and independent of His Majesty's authority. President Theodore Roosevelt later wrote that the Watauga settlers were the first men of American birth to establish a free and independent community on the continent, While while no copy of the Settlers Compact, known as the Articles of the Watauga Association, has ever been found, related documents tend to imply that the Watauga settlers still consider themselves British subjects even after the initial hostiles of the American Revolution had commenced. They wasn't even. Let me. All right, 10 steps back. Whew. These not even Indians.
Huh.
Hmm.
Now,
So
this
they're
one
not even
said they're not even
Indians, nor
Indians.
so they're not even Indians nor Great Britons.
They're the first set of colonist slash Indian children born in this area. Historians have often called the association as the earliest attempt by American born colonists to form an independent democratic government.
Hmm.
Because you know what I realized that was interesting about this tribe here, though? When we
What's
started
that?
reading all the other tribes, there was a history of the areas that they came from. You notice in this one, it didn't start that way.
So let's. So when I'm going here, I'm looking at the history. It says
Mm-hmm.
European settlers began arriving in the Watauga, Nolichucky, and the Holston River valleys in the late 1760s and early 1770s. Most migrating from Virginia via the Great Valley, although a few were believed to have been regulators fleeing North Carolina after their defeat at the Battle of Almanac. Almanacs. These settlers mistakenly believed, or at least claimed to have believed, the Watauga and Nolichucky valleys were part of the land ceded to Virginia by the Cherokee in 1770 Treaty of Lochaber. I guess we're going to look at the Treaty of Lochaber, at but a subsequent survey by Colonel John Donaldson confirmed that these lands were still part of the Cherokee domain, as settlement on lands west of colonial boundaries violated the Royal Proclamation of 1763. The Watauga and Nolichucky settlers were ordered to leave. That when I guess that's when it talks about them being annexed. In May 1772, the Watauga, the Watauga, the Watauga, and Nolichucky settlers negotiated a 10-year lease directly with the Cherokee. Boom, there we go. And being outside the claims of any colony, established a Watauga Association to provide basic government functions. The lease and the subsequent purchase of these lands in 1775 were considered illegal by the British Crown and were vehemently opposed by a growing faction of the Cherokee led by the young chief Dragging Canoe. With the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War, April 1775, the settlers organized themselves into the Washington District, loyal to the United Colonies, and formed the Committee of Safety to govern it, making the end of the so-called Watauga Republic. So these were American-born settlers who were leasing land from the Cherokee. Then they ended up purchasing the land. So let me see this. It says in the spring of 1776, the Washington District Committee of Safety drafted a petition asking the colony of Virginia to annex the district. After Virginia refused, the committee drafted a similar petition dated July 5th, 1776, asking the North Carolina Assembly to annex the district. In November of that year, North Carolina granted the petition and formally annexed the area. The Washington District was finally admitted to North Carolina as North County in November 1777. So they basically, when Virginia refused to annex it, they petitioned North Carolina to do it. North Carolina did it, and then they granted that land to North Carolina. The Cherokee,
Mm-hmm.
who were allied with the British, launched an all-out invasion against the settlements in July 1776, but were soundly defeated. The Cherokee signed the Treaty of Long Island, ceding control of the Watauga, and Nolichucky valleys to the American colonies. So that's how they end up getting control of that territory.
Mm-hmm. So at this
So
time we
let's look at the
see.
structure.
Mm-hmm.
I want to look at the structure because we got to realize, because there are many of us who know, when I say us, I'm talking about the Tanchas.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the United States Constitution and their bylaws and their articles were taken from the Iroquois, written in
Mm-hmm.
Algonquin.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't the only people who were using our ancestors' structures.
Facts.
So I want to read this where it talks about, since no copy of the articles of the Watauga Association has ever been found. Most of what is known about it comes from other sources, primarily the 1776 petition of the inhabitants of the Washington District, commonly called the Watauga petition, in which the Wataugans request annexation from North Carolina. According to the petition, the articles were fashioned after the laws of Virginia and were enacted by unanimous consent of the settlers. The primary reason given for the establishment of the Watauga Association was to prevent the Watauga and Nolichucky regions from becoming a haven for debtors and felons, and for conducting public business, such as regarding of deeds and wills. So let me back up. It says from becoming a haven for debtors and felons.
Mm-hmm.
So this must have been of common practice.
Hmm.
So where were these debtors and these felons coming from? Were these prison colonies that they were creating? Something to think
Yeah.
about.
Look it up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you said that. Yeah, you said it's a haven for debtors and what did you say that was the other word?
Felons.
Felons. Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
no,
people keep forgetting there were two land masses where they were put in prison colonies. What you know now as America and Australia. And that didn't stop until the late 1800s. But that's another story.
So let's see. Other sources, such as later writings of Washington District Committee of Safety Clerk Pro Term William Tatham, and documents collected by historian J.G.M. Ramsey in the mid 19th century, revealed that the article established a 5-member court, the members of which were elected, and that the Wataugans erected a courthouse and jail at Sycamore Shoals. Historians disagree over the first 5 magistrates of the court, although most agree that it included John Carter, James Robertson, Charles Robertson, and Zachariah Isabel. The 5th member was probably Jacob Brown. Later court members included Andrew Gear, John John Roddick, and John Seaver. James Smith was probably the court's first clerk, replaced by Seaver in 1775. When Seaver was elected to the court, Felix Walker took over as clerk, with Tatham serving in his absence. So that's interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, Mark Walton says Quakers brought the prison system here. And the original one reads, I knew this was coming. That's all it's about. Settlers, immigrants born in America, establishing their independence from the crown. Now we need to establish our sovereignty. Well, original one, if you read the Constitution and you know who your tribe is, you don't have to establish something that you already have.
Bingo.
So if you're gonna establish sovereignty from something that's already sovereign, what you're doing is you're taking yourself out of the United States territory. Now the question is, how do you do that? And if you can come up with a blueprint and a plan to show exactly how you're gonna do that without declaring war on the United States and all of its allies, then we will be willing to hear what you have to say.
Believe
But we
me.
must be mindful and very careful when we start making the declaratory statements such as establishing sovereignty, because we must remember, everybody here on these social media platforms, you have an account. But everybody's account is being monitored. So just remember that. Our goal is not to declare sovereignty. Our goal is to tie back to our tribes who already have sovereignty, so
Mm-hmm.
that we can help our tribes become independent and not dependent on the government. That's what true sovereignty is. It's not taking back some land that belongs to some other tribe. so that you can then declare sovereignty, which is basically declaring war on the state or the
Mm-hmm.
country that you live in, and then you have to get your own militia and your own army. The
Facts.
United States occupies over 190 some countries that are outside the United States territory. So if you can tell me how you're going to declare sovereignty, which is basically an act of committing war against the United States, and not get mollywopped off this continent, I'll listen. But
Oh.
until then, we must be very careful about some of the things we type and some of the things we push, because what you say can and will be held against you, not just you, but all of us. Now, with
Mm-hmm.
that being said, let's um let's look at this. The Watagal people, they
Mm-hmm.
are neither British, they're not Europeans, and they're not Indians. They are the first
Half breeds.
native. They are the first native-born citizens of the
Mm-hmm.
United States of America.
Make this very clear. These are the very first adults that were children from the relationships of Indians and French, Indians and Spanish, Indians and British and colonists.
And so here's the interesting part. Why do they have these individuals grouped with the tribes?
Hmm. Grouped up,
Because you think
labeled as
about it,
tribes.
you have the Watagawan Association.
Mm-hmm.
They're down here separated with the Indians,
Mm-hmm.
but you have Vermont, which is separated, which is included with United States, France, Spain, and Vermont, and United States, France, and Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the Watagan Association is considered an indigenous association, are they trying to infer that this would be a tribe,
Under the
a
definition of it,
native?
yes, they're correct under the definition. They would be a native tribe if you understand the definition of native. Native just means you born here. That's all. So by definition, they're correct. And they're telling you they're the first native born of these people.
Native born, thus Native Americans. Is that what they're inferring? This is going to be interesting. And that's the reason why not just reading something and going vertical is important. Because had I not read this, I'm sure some of y'all may have already in the chat have already known this, but I would have made the wrong assumption that these were melanated, originally a melanated tribe. This, according to this Wikipedia, again, take it with a grain of salt. We have to take into account that this Wataga Association is the first native-born citizens to the colonies, and they were moved around by two states. They moved from Virginia because they moved to an area where they thought the land belonged to the Cherokee, who had seceded land. Come to find out, the land that they moved on was actually Cherokee land that were not seceded, and then the Cherokee ended up leasing land to them. And then after the land was leased to them, that land was annexed, which basically means that the government took the land from the Watauga Association, because the Cherokee, apparently sounds like the Cherokee violated a treaty and were not allowed to lease land to these native born individuals. Is
Mm-hmm.
there am I missing something?
Not to me. We done heard about that before. Wasn't the Iroquois in the north selling off land that they ain't had rights to sell off, doing the same thing?
Yeah, and I think they were doing it because they had the backing of France.
Of
But it
France?
sounds like the Cherokee were selling land to a people that was their land,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that this was land that they had not seceded. So they had seceded some land, part of Virginia, but they hadn't seceded this land, which was then part of Virginia, but then became annexed and taken away from Virginia, moved to North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So they did not have the right to sell land, apparently, without consent from the Europeans that they were dealing with. And at this time, it looked like from
Colonists.
the 13 colonies.
Yeah, they were dealing
Yeah.
with the colonists because the Cherokees mainly deal with the colonists. I think they dealt with the British and French for a brief minute, but mainly they were allies with the colonists the majority of the time.
Hmm. That's interesting. Interesting. We got to keep an eye on this one and put a pin in it.
Hmm.
Wow. What made you pick this, Bones?
I
Because I
don't
probably
know.
personally, man, I would have looked over it.
I just be getting them little tangles and something be like, read it. And I just start reading into it, be like, dang. It was just something about that tribe. Because you know
So now,
how we normally look at the tribes and they tell you like their history first? This one didn't. I would say it just was different.
mhm.
It just stuck out different to me.
So the Watauga Association is the first native-born Americans to declare independence from Great Britain.
Hmm.
All right, so let's.
Could that be why they
So
identified
what do we
themselves as
know?
a tribe?
Yeah, because who else could they really identify themselves as?
Identified as a tribe to buy the land, bought land from Cherokee, identified as a tribe to tie into the land, and then claim native rights because they were not born on British soil.
Thanks, Oak Cliff Chef. She says it's pronounced Watuga.
Watuga.
Yeah, Watuga. Thank you, because I was butchering this.
Mm,
Yeah, if we're ever mispronouncing something, please
yeah,
correct
please.
us,
Yes, please do.
because I hate. Yeah. So thanks, Oak Cliff Chef. So it's Watuga. That sounds a lot better. So the Watuga Association is wow. Is anybody besides me blown away by this? Maybe it's just me.
I
Okay.
told you that's why I pointed it out. I'm like, these people not even.
She says East Texas red clay land. Wow. Okay, so um have we covered who the Oneida people are?
Uh-uh.
Because I want to make sure we know exactly
The parties at.
who's playing who. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to make an assumption. Yeah, Free says sounds like the dolls rolls in a way. Exactly, Free. Sounds like the beginning of the dolls rolls, or how it's
Yeah.
it's a plan to claim a tribe that's native to here, and give them birthrights and land rights.
Mm-hmm. They set the
Yeah,
precedence. They told you they set the precedence for what other states would start doing.
yeah. On Cliff, we were just basically going over the parties that are involved in the Revolutionary War, and how the the 13 colonies decided to declare independence from Great Britain, and their allies, who were the French, who came in 2 years after the war had already started, and the French brought in Spain. Spain sided with France, but they did not side with the United States. And then you have Vermont, who basically succeeded, who didn't want to join the states, but they also didn't want to be bullied by Great Britain. So
Mm-hmm.
they declared independence because they were bullied by the colonies, and they fought on the side of the 13 colonies, but they were not declared a state yet. So that's the reason why they're separated.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the tribes. So then when we start looking at Wikipedia, or the Europeans' definition of what the Watuga are, it shows that they're the first native-born individuals that basically were without any land or without a home, because they eventually moved into Virginia through what they thought was land that was seceded by the Cherokee Nation. and it wasn't. So the Cherokee actually sold them that land, which apparently the Cherokee didn't have the right to, even though the Cherokee owned the land, because the 13 colonies decided to annex that land with the help of North Carolina,
Carolina.
take it from the Watauga, and then make that land part of North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So, so what we're doing now is we just going over the tribes that were involved on the side of the 13 colonies: France, Spain, Vermont, and so on. So the Oneida, or the Anyotaka, or Anyotikaonotu Tayu,
Mm.
meaning the people of the upright stone or standing stone in Tuscarora. So Oneida is a Tuscaroran word. Okay. Then they are Native American tribe and First Nations band. Well, see, this is where
It gets interesting
this is where the
now.
face off comes on. This is where the face off, because I'm going to use face off, and what I mean by face off is basically supplanting one nation for another. You
Mm-hmm.
say you claim the term Native American, but the Tuscarora were here before the Watauga. So the Tuscarora were here before the Watauga, before this place became America, as they called America. Then they're not Native American. They're
Mm-hmm.
indigenous. But anyway, let's just move on. The
Mm-hmm.
Tuscarora are an indigenous tribe and First Nations band. Sounds like First Nations Bank, right? They are one of the five founding nations of the Iroquois Confederation in the area of upstate New York, particularly near the Great Lakes. The Iroquois call themselves Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse, in reference to their communal lifestyle and the construction style of their dwellings. So the Oneida are part of the First Nation. Remember, the First Nation were part of the six tribes, right? Six nations. Remember? Because we talked about Six Flags.
Yep.
See, so they're the First Nations band. Okay. Originally, the Oneida inhabited the area. Later became central New York, particularly from Oneida Lake, the Oneida County. Today, the Oneida have four nationally recognized nations: Oneida Indian Nation in New York, the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, and around the Green Bay, Wisconsin, in the United States, and two in Ontario, Canada. Oneida, a Six Nation at the Six Nations of Grand River, and Oneida Nation of the Thames in South Wold. So, why is it me, or are we starting to realize that there are more federally recognized nations than just the five civilized tribes? Am I the only one seeing this?
I'm gathering it.
So it says people of the standing stone. The name Oneida is derived from the English pronunciation of Anoyotaaka, the people's name for themselves. Anayotaaka means people of the standing stone. So this is what the Oneida tribe named themselves. So the the, the Europeans named them Oneida because they couldn't pronounce Anyataaka,
Mm-hmm.
which basically means people of the standing stone. This identity is based on an ancient legend. The Oneida people were being pursued on foot by an enemy tribe. Stop. According to this, take it with a grain of salt. The Oneida people were being pursued by on foot by an enemy tribe. So if they were being pursued by on foot by an enemy tribe, then that means there were some tribes that were at war. As the enemies chased Oneida into the clearing within the woodlands, they suddenly disappeared. The enemy could not find them, and so it was said that the Oneida had shapeshifted into to the stones that stood in the clearing. As a result, they became known as the people of the standing stone. Hmm. Other legends have the Oneida people identifying as Latilu Takawa, Lati Lutakawa, the big tree people, people of big trees. Not much is written about this. Iroquois elders would have to be consulted on the oral history of this identification. The association may correspond to Iroquois concepts of the Great Tree of Peace and the associated belief system of the people. Dare we go into the Great Tree of Peace? Yes. I'll put this in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're moving to the Great Tree of Peace. Please forgive us for these detours, but I believe and I feel that they're very necessary. This is Wikipedia does not have an article with this exact name. Please search the Great Tree of Peace in Wikipedia. Why would redirect us like that? I don't know. Okay, Tree of Peace. Hmm. Sorry. Okay, so the Tree of Peace. Let me put that in there so y'all don't have to go through the same thing I went through. My apologies, everyone. Okay, for the style of wooden pole that represents a desire for peace, see peace pole. The Iroquois Tree of Peace finds its roots in a man named Dikayan Wadia, the peacegiver. The legend surrounding his place amongst the Iroquois is based in his role in creating the Five Nations Confederacy, which consisted of the Mohawks, the Oneidas, the Onondagas, the Cayugas, and the Senecas, and his place as a cultural hero to the Haudenosaunee nation, commonly known in Western culture as Iroquois. The official title of the Confederacy is Kayaniuwaka. Hold on. Kayanirenkoa. Kayanirenkoa. The Great Peace. As described by Paul A. Wallace, it is also known as Canancioni, the Longhouse, a term that describes both its geographical extent and its constitutional form. The myths and legends surrounding Dikana Wadia have the roots in the oral histories and followed many Native American tribes throughout their histories. The political reality with mythic proportions, the association of the Kanawita and the Tree of Peace is central to the Haudenosaunee. The Kanadawiya on his travels to bring a warring nation together talked only of peace, friendship, and unity. As Barbara Graymont states, the Kani Wadia's ideas and actions were noticeably separating him from his people. The Wendots could not understand a man who loved peace more than war. The great peace associated with the Kananawiya came with three parts: the good word, which is righteous in action, bringing peace for all; health, which is a sound mind and a sound body, bringing peace on earth; power, which is the establishment of civil authority, bringing with it increase in spiritual power, in keeping with will of the master of life. The creation of the five nations was given a symbol by the Kananawita that would symbolize the newly accepted peace and the unity of the five nations. The symbol chosen for the League of the Five Nations was the great white pine tree, the tree of the great long leaves. And it goes on to read, the tree had four symbolic roots: the great white roots of peace spreading north, east, south, and west. It was, if any other nation ever wished to join the league, it would have to follow the white roots of peace to the source and take shelter beneath the tree. Atop the tree, he placed an eagle to scream out a warning at the approach of danger. He symbolically planted the tree in the land of the un, un, Onondagas, the place of the Gree or the Garee, the Confederate lords or peace chiefs, would sit beneath it and be caretakers of the great peace. This tree of peace became the symbol of solitude among the chiefs. The creation of the tree of peace figuratively gave the chiefs the ability to never die, because their chiefly titles would be passed down to their successors forever. Sounds like Ebola. In this way, the League of Nations would always be kept alive. The tree of peace was its roots in creation of the League of Five Nations, but its place within the Haudenosaunee culture is crucial to its role in the continuation of its existence to this day. As A.C. Park states, the tree of peace is an important symbol of peace in Iroquois tradition and in historical record of diplomacy. Between the Iroquois and Westerners, weapons would be buried under a tree to seal a peace agreement. A tree might have been uprooted to create a cavity for the weapons. The replanted tree of top would become a tree of peace. This concept of creating a new tree of peace is rooted in the traditions created by Dinkanwadia's initial ceremony for the tree of peace. The roots will stretch in all directions, and is upon these roots our culture brothers and sisters must forge their own peace and continue to path we have created, as Barbara Graymount states. This transformation of the historical account shows the extent to which these events had taken on sacred character for the Iroquois. The extent details were not nearly as important to them as testifying to the authenticity of their confederacy and the significance of what their ancestors had done for them. Establishing unity and preserving their nationhood, the ancestors had provided for all time a purpose and a way of life for the people of the extended lodge. Its characteristic bundles of five needles became the symbol of the five nations joined together as one according to the Haudenosaunee tradition. The great law of peace ended the ancient cycle of enmity and continuous conflict between the separate tribes and united them into the Iroquois Confederation. That made them the most powerful force in North America until a rapid expansion of European colonization in the 18th century. Does anybody hear what I heard?
I think I heard what
This, this is the original peace tree.
you heard.
Yes, it is. And you know what's funny about this? What's very
This
funny
is where
about
the
this?
original peace treaty comes from. And this is the reason why the colonizers were able to use this document that they got from the five nations to draft and get these Indians to succumb. Because if you read this, according to there are different parts of this. The good
Mm-hmm.
word, which is righteous in action, bringing justice for all. Health, which is sound mind and a sound body, bringing peace on earth. Power, which is the establishment of civil authority, bringing with it an increase in spiritual power and keeping with will of the master of life. Okay. And then there's a symbol, the symbol of the tree, which is a great pine, whose roots stretch in all different directions, north, south, east, and west. So the this the five nations who, if you think about it, these five nations are actually on the side of fighting on the side of Great Britain. If you go back
Mm-hmm.
and look,
Mm-hmm.
Iroquois, the Onondaga. Well, actually, they split.
Yeah,
The
the
Iroquois,
Onondaga split.
Onondaga, the Mohawk, because the Iroquois, Onondaga, and Mohawk were part of the five nations. You
Mm-hmm.
also had the Oneida,
Mm-hmm.
so the Oneida split from them.
Yep. And even in them,
So
some
now
of
we know
them.
how the Europeans used the peace treaty to, for lack of better terms, get their way into these families.
Mm-hmm. And
Is
even
anybody
some of
seeing
them
what I'm
split.
saying?
And even some of them.
Exactly.
Some of them split and went with the loyalists. But it's kind of funny. If you know the Iroquois story, they're nothing but a mixture of five tribes that had relationships with the French that eventually broke away from the French, now back in the British.
So I guess the question would be, when did these five nations become five nations? Because this treaty was originally amongst them. This what
Mm-hmm.
brought them together. Because one of the questions was, it says that the tribes were finding it very difficult to understand King Wadia, because how can you have a tribe in times of war? All he wants to do is talk about peace, because
Mm-hmm.
it's making him sound like, if you think about it, Buddha.
Mm-hmm. Facts. But But then you got to remember the Iroquois are nothing but these five tribes coming together as one.
Right. So what I'm saying is, again, I can only speculate until we find further information. These tribes came together because they were warned way before the Europeans got here,
Hmm. They were
which
one with
many
the
people.
French. They were fighting with the French. So that original treaty, that peace treaty, would be with them and the French.
Mhm.
There, and that's
Right, but
creating
I'm
the
saying I said
Iroquois.
before. Right, but what I'm thinking, and I could be wrong, is that these tribes were warned amongst each other before the French even got here,
Hmm.
or and maybe they decided to come together once the French got here. But what I'm saying is, and what I'm thinking, what I'm saying is that they had this treaty amongst the chiefs themselves
Hmm.
because they needed to unite because they got tired of fighting each other. Because at the end of the day, with the tenets that they're proposing and how it goes on to talk about, it was given a symbol by the Kananawita that would symbolize the newly accepted peace and unity of the five nations. The symbol chosen for the League of the Five Nations was the great white pine tree, the tree of the great long leaves. And it basically goes on and talks about what it means and how that the League of Nations would always be kept alive, which is basically, if you think about it, Cliff, we are still talking in the basically, so I'm doing this is during the time of the
1768, 17, yeah, 1760s to 1780s.
but we had to take a side detour because we needed to know about this treaty of peace, which is basically a peace treaty.
But wouldn't this be the Iroquois peace treaty? By default,
Well, yeah,
by
that's what I'm
another
saying.
name, wouldn't this be also by another name? The Great Tree of Peace will also, you could also call it that because they're technically the same people. It depends on who telling the
Yeah,
story, basically.
right. And what I'm saying and what I'm
Wow.
feeling and thinking is that this treaty that was created, or this tree of peace that was created by these five nations, was duplicated and used every time the Europeans wanted to bring a tribe over to their side.
Mm-hmm.
Because it talks about burying your weapons up under the tree. Well, if you digging a cavity up under the tree to put your weapons there, then there's no need for you to be fighting.
Mm-hmm. Something else
It
interesting.
says they became one of the more. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
So, it goes on to say at the end is that the characteristic bundles of five needles became the symbol of the five nations joined together as one. According to the Haudenosaunee tradition, the great law of peace under the ancient cycle of enmity and continuous conflict between the separate tribes and united them into the Iroquois Confederacy that made them the most powerful force in North America until the rapid expansion of European colonization in the 18th century.
Mm-hmm.
So they were, according to this, again, take it with a grain of salt. And this is the reason why it's important to get with your tribes, because they will be able to verify this when this confederation took place.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they were as powerful as history dictates and says, then there would be tribes that would also be able to support this claim, if that makes sense. So what I'm saying is that this treaty was an original Iroquoian treaty, something that our ancestors created because they got tired of warring with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read here under references, it says, I guess they did a book on him, and Dinkana Wadia Wadi is called the Heavenly Messenger. I'm just gonna leave that right there.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, this is basically where they got the peace treaty from.
And they split, and this is where they breaking the peace treaty with each other.
Yeah,
Cause you see, they on one side. What's that? The Onondaga on the other side. The Iroquois on the other side. Yeah, this is them actually splitting the peace treaty between them. Because remember, we asked that question that once you get up to the war, you notice you don't see the Iroquois no more. You don't hear that name no more.
No. So I would think that they became United States citizens,
Yeah,
which would make them crap, which would make them Native Americans.
yeah. Because by the end of 1783, that's it. You don't hear about them no more. Not by that name.
Peace, James. Peace, Big Hawk. So we were just talking, and we think we found the original peace treaty, or the tree of peace. Peace treaty. Ain't that funny?
Mm-hmm.
The way they do the English language.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you read it from left, if you read it from right to left, you get peace of tree, the or T.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And to throw you right in front of you is right in front of your eyes. Perception.
Because as I'm reading, I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds like a peace treaty. This looks like a peace treaty. So they even did their peace treaty like they did their constitution and their bylaws. And
Mm-hmm.
for those of you, and for those people that don't think that a constitution and bylaws are taken from our people, what is the CEO called?
Chief. Chief executive.
Executive officer.
Mm-hmm. Bylaws in business and companies is your ancestors. Same structure, same format. Why do we run from this again?
So basically, they're creating. People are basically creating their businesses under the tribal structure.
There's a little more back on the
Go
page
ahead.
dealing with them where it say people are the standing stone. It says
Hmm.
individuals born into the one day nation are identified according to their spirit name, or what may be called an Indian name, their clan, and their family unit within a clan. The people have maternal kinship, and children are considered to be born into the mother's clan, through which descent and inheritance passes. Each gender, clan, and family unit within a clan has particular duties and responsibilities in the tribe. Clan identities go back to the creation story of the Wanya Taki peoples. The people identify with three clans: the wolf, turtle, or bear clans. Children take their social status from their mother's clan. Because of this, her eldest brother is a significant figure for the children, especially boys. He supervises the boys' passage into adulthood as men.
Wow.
Traditions sound very, very, ugh.
So let's look at the homeland boundaries. During the early 17th century, the Oneidas occupied and maintained roughly 6 million acres of land in what is modern day central New York State. Formal boundaries were established in the 1768 Treaty of Fort Stanwix, and again after September 4th, 1784, when the governor of New York, George Clinton, requested from the Oneidas the borders of their land. Borders were established in the Treaty of Fort Stanwix. So when the governor of New York, George Clinton, not to be confused with the Parliament of Funkadelics, requested from the Oneidas the borders of their land, borders were established in the Treaty of Fort Stanwix. So the Fort Stanwix Treaty established the borders.
Mm-hmm.
So the Oneida, along with the five other nations, other tribes of the Iroquois Confederacy, initially maintained a policy of neutrality in the American Revolution. Remember what we talked about neutrality? You
Mm-hmm.
can't be you can't be neutral. You have to pick a side,
Neutral gonna get you hit.
especially when it comes,
Ow!
especially if you're gonna be dealing with both sides. If you're gonna be
What?
dealing with both sides, you cannot be neutral.
Never,
So
ever,
I'm gonna say it
ever.
again. If you are dealing with both sides, you cannot be neutral.
Oxymoron. Don't go hand in hand. Round hole, square peg.
So it says this policy allowed the Confederacy increased leverage against both sides in the war because they could threaten to join one side or the other in the event of any provocation. Neutrality quickly crumbled, however. The preponderance of the Mohawks, Senecas, Cayugas, and on Onondagas sided with the Loyalists and British for some time. The Oneidas continued advocating neutrality and attempting to restore consensus among the six tribes of the Confederacy. But ultimately, the Oneida as well had to choose a side. See, because of their proximity and relations with the rebel communities, most Oneida favored the revolutionaries.
GBA,
Let me
guilt
see.
by
Let me
association.
read that again. Because of their proximity and relations with the rebel communities, most Oneida favored the revolutionaries.
Wars are
In
fought by
contrast,
proximity.
some of the pro British tribes, exactly, some of the pro British tribes were closer to the British stronghold at Fort Niagara. In addition, the Oneida were influenced by the Presbyterian missionary Samuel Kirkland,
Hmm.
who had worked among them since 1764. Remember, they couldn't beat us physically, so they had to introduce us to religion.
Bing, bing.
And a number of Oneida were baptized as Christians in the decade before the Revolution. So,
Groundwork, groundwork, groundwork,
man, you can't make this up.
groundwork.
A number of Oneida were baptized as Christians in the decade before the revolution. Kirkland worked to help them with education and their struggles with alcohol. Along relations with them, many began to form a stronger cultural links to the colonists.
Hold up.
The Oneida officially, go ahead,
Education and their struggles with alcohol.
alcohol.
So, could this be the reason, not point and blame? Could this introduction of this new alcohol, that if you start studying horizontal during this timeline, you see there's a big problem with it? Could this be
Yeah, because
chemical
molasses,
warfare?
molasses, what they was using to make rum.
Chem-
Molasses, what they were using to make rum.
chemical warfare? Just wanted to point it out.
You might be right, because it is a stereotype that Native Americans have a problem with
We
alcohol
can't handle our
abuse.
liquor. We can't handle our liquor. Especially that, what? Bad decisions, we get shaky. Hmm. Dot that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a good point. So it says through relations with them, many began to form stronger bonds and cultural links to the colonists. The Oneida officially joined the rebel side and contributed in many ways to the war effort. Their warriors were often used to scout on offensive campaigns and to assess enemy operations around Fort Stanwix, also known as Fort Schuyler. The Oneida also provided an open line of communication between the rebels and their Iroquois foes.
Because they can speak the
Stop.
Iroquois language and the language of the
Mm-hmm.
rebels. Remember, the Wanaya, they're one of the original tribes that formed the Iroquois. Hmm.
So the Oneida also provided, okay, so it says in 1777 at the Battle of Orisaki, about 50 Oneida fought alongside the colonial militia. This included Tayona Janigan,
And her
Tayona,
husband.
Tayona Janigan and her husband, Han Yeri. What? Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Who?
Mm-hmm.
Han Yeri. Han Yeri. Tawan, Tiwan Han Garankin. Tiwan Han Garankin. I see why they call him Han
Yeah,
Yeri.
they said was a one nighter. Well, her name, she was a one nighter woman who fought in the August 6, 1777 battle of, what's that, Arscany during the American Revolutionary War. Armed with two pistols, she rode into battle and fought alongside her husband, Han Yeri, and her son, Cornelius. Tyrona Jigan helped her husband reload his gun after. Then I got to bring up the whole thing. Han Solo and Princess Leia riding in the bang, man. I'm just a saying.
Yeah, after you finish that, the story gets deeper.
Just pulling up the ending part of that right now, where it says
So what?
helped her husband
Yeah,
reload
go
his
ahead and finish
gun.
that.
Said She helped her husband reload his gun after a musket ball struck him in the wrist. After the battle, she rode on horseback to bring news of the outcome to local rebels and Indians. An article in September 3rd Pennsylvania Journal and Weekly Advertised describes the incident. A friendly Indian with his wife and son, who distinguished themselves remarkably on the occasion. The Indian killed nine of the enemy when having received a ball through his wrist that disabled him from using his gun. He then fought with his tomahawk. His son killed two, and his wife on horseback fought by his side with pistols during the whole action, which lasted 6 hours. God, googly moogly. Don't mess with that
Okay.
family. Don't mess with that family.
Okay.
That's
So
hilarious.
this is why it's important that the lines, the bloodlines, run through the mother sides. Han Yeri, Tawan Tawa Han Garan Ken, who takes up the snowshoe, born in 1724, died in 1794, was also known as Hanyeri Doxtator. Hanyeri was born into his mother's wolf clan, as the Iroquois had a maternal society with women holding property and hereditary leadership passing through their lines. Children took the nationality and clan of their mother as they gained social status through her. He became a war chief of the Oneida people and was key during the American Revolutionary War, considered to be one of the most influential leaders of the Oneida. Yeri fought in battles of Iriscani against loyalists and other members of the Haudenosaunee. He was married to Tyan John Negan. Now it says nomenclature. Heinrich was thought to have had a German Palatine father, although this statement is most likely a result of confusion with another family of Dock staters that can trace their line back to George Doster, a German Palatine who settled in upstate New York. Heinrich is not in his line, and therefore his children most likely adopted the name. There are also unclear references in documents of the period of Wolf Clan title Otachiti or carries a quiver. It is possible that the surname Dachdatter could have developed as an Anglicanization of his title. This was discussed in the online resources of Oneida Nation. Americans feared invasion from Canada throughout much of the 1776. Late that year, another Oneida leader brought accurate intelligence, including there would be no attack that year. Gistalak was a shaman, holder of a league office in the Wolf Clan. The Oneidas had nine such titles, and they carried immense prestige. Gistalak's title was considered to be the highest, and has a gifted public speaker. He spoke for the Sachems in the council. He was a very influential man among the Oneidas, strongly pro-American in outlook. Ajistalak had a great deal to do with the pro-American stand of the Oneidas during the war. It is likely that it was Ajistalak who in 1778 declared his nation's unalterable resolution at every hazard to hold fast the convenient chain with the United States, and with which to be buried in the same grave or to enjoy the fruits of victory and peace. This word is a variant of us is terrer, meaning grasshopper, which was also known which was also a known nickname of Hanyeri. Beginning in the 1780s, a Peter Osisteri, likely Hanyeri's son, is recorded using this name as well. It is possible that the title became hereditary. Like many accounts from this area, the records were fragmentary and sometimes transcribed by Indian agents with poor phonetic accuracy to the preservation of indigenous languages. So, how about that?
Hold on. Let me pile on a little bit more that makes it more interesting, real quick. It says Hanyeri was a head warrior throughout the Saratoga campaign and was assisted by, it said, Tyrone Gina, who transported messages for the rebels. General Horatio Gates ordered Colonel Peter Gavinsvoort to deliver to her 3 gallons of rum for a wintry supply for her family as reward for her services. And what it says, 1750, they said she married Hanyeri Takahara. Whew, he who takes up the snowshoe. I'm not even finna mess his name up. A chief warrior of the Wolf
Yeah.
Clan. The couple settled and helped found, what's this, Arska and Wundia village near the mouth of the Arskani Creek. The couple had three sons and a daughter and postponed on an expansive farm. Hanyeri having become one of the wealthiest Wandia by 1777. The family had a frame house, a barn, wagon, and a sleigh. They grew a variety of crops and raised livestock and other animals, including 15 horses, 100 chickens, 60 hogs, 6 turkeys, 6 cattle, and 2 sheep. Carol and Jean cooked
And a bunch
meals.
in the pear tree. Good grief.
They said she cooked meals in kettles made of brass and copper and served guests on peterware plates. The family catered to people from the nearby Fort Stanwix as well as travelers. After the Battle of, they said, Orskini, a pro-British Iroquois war party attacked Orska, destroying the village and the family's house and belongings. Say Hunyeri died sometime prior to November 1794. One account relates that Tyrogenia, keep messing up her name, went blind before she died in 1822. Much of what is known of her is taken from the manuscripts of Lamont Draper, a 19th century historian. Now, Han Yeri's wife, not Han, the son wife, was Sarah Marchand, taken prisoner with her sister Kate from the Shawanoes and remained with the Mohawks.
Could that be those 1810 blacks we talking about?
I can could be because they say he married Sarah Martin, then she was taken prisoner with her sister Kate from the Shawanoes and remained with the Mohawks. I'm willing to say they wasn't Indian women. Could be wrong.
So you see how we had to go from you get a you read Oneida, and then once you get from Oneida, then you have to go into different areas just to keep up with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason why it is very imperative that we don't just look at history as linear, because there's a lot of things that's going on in the peripheral
Simultaneously.
that that's happening simultaneously. So we have to be very careful when we're reading this information so we can have a better understanding,
Mm-hmm.
overstanding and understanding of what's going on. Because I mean, just basically, again, take it with a grain of salt. Do your due diligence, do your research, tie into your tribes, and you'll find out that some of this stuff is actually has validity to it, and it will fill in a lot of gaps for us. So yeah, man.
Yeah, I'm reading what Free said. Y'all know how my mind works. It goes like putting the puzzle pieces together. She said, "Doesn't a snowshoe look like a racket? He who takes up the racket." And then when she said that, it made my mind even flip even more to how we talk and relate to things today. He who takes up the
Mhm.
ratchet. What is ratchet? Weapon, ratchet, weapon. I don't know. Like I said, my mind just see words and just start flipping because vowels and stuff are interchangeable. Just crazy rambling.
I mean, but it has some validity to it.
Mm-hmm.
The English language is a spell. So the first book that was published was a spelling book. So
Yep.
that should tell you something.
I'm gonna say it again. I don't think the Mohawks were kidnapping no Indian women. Why? You got your own Indian women. Why you gonna go? No. Let me stop. Hush.
You wouldn't have to kidnap another Indian woman unless you were trying to marry in a tribe, unless you were trying to have a peace agreement, and then she wouldn't be a slave; she'd be your wife.
Man, why would
I'm
you
just saying.
kidnap them if you're trying to have a peace agreement? Hmm. Ain't that something?
Dude, this is crazy.
Mm-mm-mm.
He says little hinges swing big doors. Yeah, we looks like we've are standing on the threshold of some big doors.
Yep, yep, yep.
And we've only talked about two tribes. Well, yeah, two tribes. We talked about an indigenous tribe, and we talked about the first on record from
Hmm.
man. I'm glad I brought my hard hat.
You too.
We gonna need some more backhoes though,
Yeah,
cause
it's
there's a
coming
lot of
down.
digging.
It's coming down. It's coming down. Just when you
So
think,
the
just when you
importance,
think.
and that was the reason why they were stressing the importance of kinship because Han Yeri, no one they didn't talk about his father because if his father had Indian ties, they would have said so.
Hmm. They made
So
sure to put the
he
emphasis
tied
on his
in
mother.
through
Hmm.
exactly. He tied in through her lineage, through her bloodlines, through her relations, through her political activity with the Oneida tribe, and he became a chief.
Hmm.
So here's an example of how someone who is not native or who is not indigenous can become a chief of a tribe in the 1700s.
Hmm. You seeing it?
So she was not taken a slave, she was not raped, she was not forced.
Nope. People made choices. You might not like the choices that were made, but people made choices. I mean, we have to start accepting and facing it. I mean, how much more was must it keep slapping us in the face before we get it? We got to take responsibility for our actions.
And we are not exonerating or implying by any stretch of the imagination that the Europeans had nothing to do with this. That is nowhere near close to what we're saying. What we're saying is we had a bigger part than we would like to believe and want to accept. And until we accept our part in it, no matter
Hmm.
how small or big that you view it, until we accept it and then work on what we can do to fix it, we're going to continue with the same cycle. Now I don't know about y'all, but I'm not trying to pass that cycle on to my kids.
No.
I mean, each of us has our own, our own personal preference. Like our government continues to kick the can and let the children decide to fix it. But me, I'm on a personal responsibility.
Hmm.
My goal is to fix the problem in the best way I can. And at the end of the day, if and I'm real talk, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Facts. Yes, Oak Cliff
Period.
Tiff.
Point blank in discussion.
The one dia is mostly white now, but that does not exonerate us because we have to ask ourselves, how did they end up that way? It was us who allowed it. See, you can't allow somebody to do something, then once it go bad, want to cry wolf. It doesn't work that way, and it's not, and it makes sense why we're still stuck in these conditions, because we're not gonna get out of it until we fix it. Facts, Golden Moon. We had our hand in the cookie jar, and it doesn't matter how we go about this, how we try, what we write down on paper, what we try to build. If you're not willing to accept the wrongs, then the foundation will never be straight. And anything you try to do will be crooked, you know? And it's not directed towards you, Oak Cliff. No, I was just speaking on it. Because, you have some people that would like to try to use it as an excuse on why we shouldn't do the work. Because a lot of the tribes don't look like us anymore, or we don't to be around people who don't look like us. But isn't that how they end up taking over a lot of our stuff? Because at times when we could have stood back and did something, we played the spectators, we played the neutral parties, and by not saying anything and by allowing the madness to go on our land, this is the effects of the cause. Everything has a cause and effect.
And let's be honest. There are some of us, there are many of us who look like us that claim they don't want anything to do with white folks or colonizers because they're scared of them, or they may work for them. So they get on YouTube and run off at the mouth with cracker this and European that, and I can't be down with those people, but yet and still they got a boss
Hmm.
that's European.
Yeah.
Or they choose not to deal with Europeans because they are scared of them. Yeah, I said it. You're scared
Hmm.
because you need that what they call fiat currency to feed your family. And again, there's nothing wrong with having a job.
Not knocking no
There's
one.
nothing wrong with working to
Do what
take
you
care
got
of
to
your
do. Yeah,
family.
to do what you got to do to provide for your family. Nobody's knocking that.
But at the end of the day, we need to stop hiding behind these icons in YouTube like we're these great uh Indians that's ready to mount up and go to war when in actuality we scared to hold a conversation with people that don't even look like us.
Hmm.
We need to be real about it. If you scared, say you scared. But don't hide behind an icon like you're gonna do something big and bad, but then you have no proof that you're doing anything.
Hmm.
You're not doing anything in your community. You're not even helping the people that live right down the street from you. If no one knows that you're an Indian
What are you doing?
and no one knows that you're right, no one knows that you're trying to find your genealogy or help other people find their genealogy, what
What
are
are you,
you doing?
what are you doing really? Because once the screen go off and you move away from the keyboard, the majority of people go out here and finance our own destruction. I mean, let's tell it how it is. We are relatives here. We should be able to air out our truths and face it. Stop balling up and whining, but such and such, but nothing. And if you look at it, that is the problem. Oh, go ahead, TMH.
No, because here's my take on it. Like I said, and someone was talking about and mentioned the sovereignty, and again, when we speak on those things that you text in the chat, we know you understand, but we want to make sure that people that are viewing don't view what we're saying, or we don't they don't look at it as we're talking about forming our own government or militia. Those things need to be made clear. So when we speak on it, we're not it's not an attack on you. So please
Yeah,
understand it.
yeah,
Please
yeah.
don't mistake my passion for anger. But at the end of the day, we must, for lack of better terms, draw a line in the sand and separate the real from the fake. I'm just gonna call it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Either you a real Indian or you a fake one. If
Mm-hmm.
you a real Indian and you are tied into a tribe and you are promoting or supporting somebody signing up to be a sovereign, or somebody's setting up a treaty to get some land that they purchased, then you a fraud. And if you're not a fraud, show me show me your chief or your council signing off on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. It's that simple. Some of us are trying to exploit the communities to get money, to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my mentality about this. If we're claiming that the Europeans have been exploiting us to get money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is just me. If that's the case, why are you not, or why are we not getting money from them to help our people? Why are we getting money from our own people to help our own people? Why don't we get money from the people that got the money to help our people?
Hmm. I'm listening.
If you're so bold and you're so bad, you this brave Indian, why are you taking money from your own people to help your people? Why don't you do business with these colonizers and get your paper up or get your bag and help your own people?
That's what I'm talking about.
Since you so
I
bad,
hear that.
if you
I
so
hear
bad, do that. Be man enough, be woman enough to go out and sell to people that are colonizers. Since you so bold, since you so great, if you that great, I dare you to do that.
Ain't that an A2 motto?
I think it is.
We gonna do the
Don't
real
be getting
work.
upset because right, don't be upset because we have a nonprofit organization that messes with your pay model. So now you can't do super chats and the like and get and continue to exploit our people. Won't you be bad and go over there and get some of their money, get some of their fiat currency? Since you a bad Indian, show me you a bad Indian. Because if not, you a fake.
Bingo.
I own my own company.
I heard
I
pretending
employ people. I
was the
teach
term.
people how to be business owners. Majority of my clients ain't Indians. So at the end of the day, real recognize real. And that's the reason
Facts.
why my mentality is from the standpoint of who is verifying for you. Will your hood put up for you? Will your hood support you?
Hmm.
Where's your hood showing you love on your YouTube channels? How many of the people that are putting up likes from the neighborhood that you live in?
Hmm.
I'll wait.
Matter of fact, do
What are
you
you
even
doing? What are
show
you
love to
doing
your
for your
neighborhood?
community? Or could it be, and this is a question, not an accusation, or could it be you have hustled so many people in your community that nobody will vouch for you and you're forced to go on YouTube where nobody knows you to get paid,
Like that, like that, like that.
which makes you worse than the colonizer and the European that you proclaiming to hate.
Ain't no sugarcoating here. We gonna tell you what it
Like I said,
is.
anybody got a problem with me, they know where I'm at. My
Hey,
information is public on the website. Just
uh,
but I tell you this much, you better know the Virginia law before you come stepping up. This ain't up north. Don't get
a
it
hit
twisted.
dog, a hit dog, a holler though. That's all I got to say.
You know, and that's all it is. Like we said, this is for the people, by the people, for the people. Everything is transparent. That's it. Find your tribe, and we will help you help your tribe. That's what we here for. 7 days a week, 365, 24/7. If you doubt us, check us out. That's all I can say. If you doubt us, just check us out.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you all you gotta do is try me. All you gotta do is try me. My
That
information is public. Give me a call, and you'll find out how serious I am. I'm about this work. I'm not about a whole bunch of talking. I'm about work. I'm not about a whole bunch of rah rah. I'm about work. I'm about helping people get to finding their tribes and helping people's tribes become independent.
self-sufficient.
Because you can't be sovereign begging for stuff. You can't be sovereign asking for civil rights. That's not
That's
sovereignty.
not sovereign. You're still a citizen. Civil rights. Civil. Come on, man. That's our main mission statement. Getting the American Indian and the tribe self sufficient and independent to stand on their own. You holler freedom. What's more free than being able to provide for yourself? Not having to have your hand out or hoping somebody got crumbs to give you or allow you to come to the back door or wait at the back of the line. It's kind of funny. People want to quick to go to war and violence to get from the back of the line. But when all it takes is you making a personal adjustment of self to correct the problem, everybody
Mm.
ducking and hiding. If you
It's
scared to
like what?
face yourself, if you can't face yourself, I'm supposed to believe I can stand beside you and physically fight an enemy. Maybe y'all get that $2 movie crap out of here.
The matinee.
Literally. To go along with this theories and all these acts we've been reading along so far. Just as guilty.
Facts. Facts.
So here's a question. Here's a question for the chat, and here's a chat. Here's a question that y'all need to ask. Even and please ask it to me first. You judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. What fruit are you bearing? Who's benefiting from your work? Is it real fruit or is the fruit virtual?
Hmm.
Ooh, wait a minute. Oh man.
Can this fruit get up and walk away and pass and pollinate and germinate the knowledge of these seeds to other fruits and stuff out here? Hmm?
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Or is it
man.
stuck in a virtual world? Ooh, look at me, look at me.
Again, this is the question that we need to start asking everybody that comes on these channels and start promoting stuff. What fruit are you bearing? Because at the end of the day, let's be real. You are only a great teacher if you got great students. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean that's the math.
You are only a great leader if you produce great leaders. You are not a great leader if you produce great followers. That makes you a dictator.
Bingo.
So,
Man.
what fruit are you bearing? What are you producing that's going to outlive you like our ancestor did?
Mm,
Let's not talk about how great we are. Let's talk about the work that we were doing, that we are doing that's going to outlive us. What are you doing?
that's what I'm
This is a
talking
question I
about.
want everybody in the chat to ask everybody, including me.
Mm-hmm.
Including me. This does not exclude me. This includes me. What are you
Facts.
doing that's going to bear fruit so that when you leave this planet, the work will be still continuing? Meaning, who are you teaching that's going to go out and teach? What did you put in place that's going to leave a legacy for your ancestors? Seven
Hmm.
generations. If you
Hmm.
don't have an answer, then why are you up here?
Na na na
That's the
na.
question you should ask everybody, including me. Not excluding me, including me. And if you really want to get a good glimpse of what I'm talking about and what I'm doing, all you gotta do is start looking at what we're introducing.
That's it.
Start looking at what we're doing as far as the community and reaching out to the community and hearing what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Check us out. Look us up. A Tauntonist Assembly. Where the gathering of the minds, where the real work gets done. 365. Team no sleep, no days off.
And for those of you who are actually doing the work, please
Keep it
let
up.
us know so we can do a community spotlight and highlight the work that you're doing, because not everybody is up here to have a YouTube channel. People are
Mm-hmm.
doing the actual work that we're putting out so that they can help their community. So you don't have time to do a YouTube. But
Mm-hmm.
the work that you do is no less important. We need to hear from you. We need to expose people to what you're doing so they know that this is not just for show.
Mm-hmm. This is the rallying cry. As we do the work, we display it so like-minded people in our areas. Most of us got more contacts online than we do in our own neighborhood. I'm finna say it again. Most of us got more virtual contacts online than we have in our own neighborhoods. That's sad.
That is sad, because the question is how well do they know you? Have they seen you? Do they know your real name?
Mm-hmm.
Do they know where you live? Or are you hiding? Again, I'm calling you out. If you real, you will act real.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
again,
it.
Antonio, that's anything that people are doing, it needs to be exposed. And I'm talking about from the standpoint of helping the community, not for calling somebody out.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who are watching these chats and they're not saying anything. And they're probably wondering, okay, we hear all this rah rah, we hear all this talk, but what are people doing? That's why we're doing a community spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
There have been two community spotlights, and I want to give a shout out to Miss Pamela Hall and to Miss
Mm-hmm.
Danielle Jeffers. They were the first individuals that we did a community spotlight on. And if you look at the one that was done by these two women, you'll see the different age groups
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see the different impacts.
Mm-hmm.
And these are two very powerful women.
Yes, indeed. Respect, respect to our sisters. Respect to our sisters out there that's putting the work in. That's not taking for a no. That's not taking no for an answer. That's leading by example. That's showing the older and younger generations the beauty and the benefits of genealogy. The beauty and benefits of knowing who you are and not giving up the quest to know thyself. So again, We take this time to show respect and we honor all the work that you do.
And by the way, if you really want to know what I'm doing in the community, check out the community spotlight on Daniel Jeffers. That will answer any question that you will ever have.
Simple. We don't stand here pointing fingers. We can only talk about what we know. We can only display what we are doing on a day to day basis.
Oh, Cliff Tiff, we gotta get you up here because
Mm-hmm.
you're doing something that a lot of people aren't doing. You said your sons know that they're American and not Black Negro or
Mm-hmm.
African American, and if you hear them talking to their friends about it, we need to hear your story.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do a community spotlight on you. We need to do a community spotlight on anybody that's on this platform that's doing real work.
Yeah, if you out there talking to people, that's work. If you helping people with genealogy, that's the real work. If you're taking the time out correcting the youth on how they view themselves and their stance in this society, that's the real work. Anybody can stand back and say a couple of catchphrases and reread stories over a microphone or a video platform. But it's getting out here into these neighborhoods to show people, it can be done. Because there's a lot of our brothers and sisters out here that have this desire, this burning desire. They know there's something wrong. They know they belong to something greater, but they're just looking to see. And each and every last one of us have a shining light. So let that light shine. We've been hiding and running from ourselves for too long. It's like we done became afraid of our own light. So let's light the road so that our people who trying to find their way home can get home. Or that burden, we're gonna carry that too. Remember who we are. Remember who you are. And pick up your responsibility where we dropped it off at. And let's move together as relatives to fix this. True, we will not always agree on this journey, and we don't have to. Because we all come from different walks of life. We all have different experiences that allow us to see certain things. We all share particular moral values and codes that even allow us to be at this moment in time right here.
And Antonio brought up a great point. He says, and also just know you can't help anyone until you help yourself. You can only bring somebody as far as you have gone. Lead by example and then let your fruits pick up the remnants and move forward. That is
Facts.
powerful, Antonio. Very
Facts.
powerful. Thanks, bro. That's real. You can't lead nobody past where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, if you don't have any fruit, what kind of tree are you?
Hmm.
I'll wait.
Can't be too helpful. Bitter
So
leaves
at the
and
end of the day,
stems.
this is we don't have time to be playing with people.
No.
We don't have time for the BS. Um, if you real, show you real.
That's it. And I'm not
Enough of
asking
the
you to
rah
show it
rah.
to me,
What are you doing?
not to
Yeah,
me,
no.
not the A2, not the panel. No, show that you real to your community. Show that you real to your family. Show that you real to yourself. We say this is who we are, so let's stop saying it and let's live it. That's all we're saying. Let's stop saying it and let's live it. Yeah, it sound good when you have it on a shirt. You put a feather on your head, but who want to do that? This is our life we're talking about. Our life we're talking about. It's not a fad. It's not something that you pick up and put back down. If you win it, you in it to the end. If not, gracefully step aside.
I mean, what they say, lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Boom, boom, boom,
At the end of the day,
boom, boom,
either one.
boom, boom.
Really, really, really.
I had to put a little, break the moment a little.
Look, levity. Oh, Cliff Tiff, you're absolutely right. This is so serious. We're rewriting our own history, and at the end of the day, I'm gonna give a shout out to LJ Free. She brought up a great point,
Free.
and this is something that I didn't think about, but it was very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Think about this: all this information is being put out on YouTube,
Yep.
all these social media platforms that we have, right,
Mm-hmm.
is being recorded.
Yep.
So if we are putting this information out, and everything that we say and everything that we do, back chats included,
Mm-hmm.
back chats included,
Mm-hmm.
back chats included,
Mm-hmm.
what record is being kept? So if you're a real Indian, right,
Uh-huh. Give it to him that.
and all of your information is being recorded,
Mm-hmm.
who is it being recorded for?
Ah.
I'm gonna ask that question one more time. If all of your information is being recorded, because we know it's being recorded, and if you think it's not being recorded, you might want to go look up some of them laws that are being passed under Homeland Security, since you claim to know law.
Mm-hmm.
If all of our information is being recorded, the question is, who is it being recorded for? How do you want to go down in history about your tribe?
Hmm.
Back chats included. Back chats included.
Bang.
Back chats included.
So now what we really talking about?
Okay. Okay.
Transparency.
All right.
Be careful what you write. Be careful what you say, because it's recorded.
100 years from
Just
now, what we
because.
do today can be looked back on. This is history in the
So
making.
here's the deal: what you do in the light, what you do in the dark, will be exposed. Just because I don't see it or
Mm-hmm.
nobody else see it, don't mean it won't be seen. Just know that.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, that all this information is being recorded. So how do you want to go down as being recorded? And when the tribe looks up your record, or when your information gets exposed, because this is public information, it can be pulled up. Don't think it can't.
Yes, it can. That's why here, this is a Tontonist Assembly, a non-profit organization dedicated to lifting the voices of the American Indians and helping the American Indian and tribes become self-sufficient. We don't do this just to be running around doing this. This is well documented. We formed the company to help the community. We made it non-profit to keep it transparent so we can bring in funds and resources to help. We gotta wake up, people. We gotta wake up. The time of playing games is over. Only the real need to apply.
So Oakland brought up a good point. She says, "Get your own transcripts from these lives. We need receipts." And isn't it interesting how receipts sounds like recipes?
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So what meals are your receipts? What meals are your receipts cooking?
What's in your wallet?
So I mean, that's something to think about. And I'm not saying it because I'm threatening to go tell on somebody. I'm saying it so people can keep in mind that as they're making these statements and as they're putting this stuff in writing, it's being recorded.
Mm-hmm. And like LJ said,
I don't
indeed.
have to tell on you. You tell on yourself.
How she said it, I'm gonna quote it word for word. Indeed, remember our enemy had 200 years to study us. Do you really think your words, thoughts, and opinions won't be public record for all to see? Help the tribes, don't hurt them. Again, help the tribes, don't hurt them. Claiming to be Indian and doing this foolishness is hurting the tribes. Then you wonder why they don't want to step out to help some of the American Indians that's looking for help. Because there's too many of us on these platforms that are hurting the tribes.
All I'm saying is that we need to start asking more questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? When do you come from? And why are you doing what you're doing? And who's going to vouch for you? Because that's what community is. People that will vouch for you. If there's no one in your community that's going to vouch for you, what does that say about you? If there's no one watching your YouTube channels in your community, what does that say about you? If you cannot, I'm not saying will not, there's a difference between will not and cannot. If you cannot produce any proof that you're doing anything in your community to help your community, what does that say about you?
No, 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 no. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm.
That's a question we need to start asking. What are you doing in your community? What fruit is your tree bearing?
And around y'all.
No, it's not that. It's
At
just a
the end,
passion for. It's just a passion for our people, our tribes. The dedication to want real change, to spark the conversations that need to be had, to start addressing the elephants in the room.
and damn, these are some mammoths.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to stop walking right past it like it ain't there. Like, oh, there's an elephant in the room, but it's cool. No, there's an elephant in the room. Can we address this first? Crazy.
And Free brought up a great point. Speaking disparagingly about tribes because of what you've heard or popular opinion without knowing the indigenous truth is a cancer amongst our people. We've got to tighten up for real, for real. That's true. We not only do that amongst tribes, we do that amongst religious predilections and things of that nature.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yes.
have no
Everything.
idea
Almost
about the next
everything.
person's belief, but you're gonna come out and speak about it. But you ain't never studied a day in your life, never been around it, but you're gonna talk about it. It ain't fake as.
That's crazy. It's insane. Honestly, I'm sorry. That's just
But what's
that's
worse, the
some
person that
asylum
does
stuff
it,
right there.
the person that's doing it, or the group of people that accept it?
Mm,
Because I'm like, if that's the case, why do we have the ability to think and process for ourselves? If we were meant just to take what something said as it is and don't rationalize it and apply it, why even have a brain? Why even
mm.
have the creator's given ability to make decisions? Just a thought.
Well, at the end of the day, let's put this in its proper perspective, shall we?
Let it go.
Why would a person not mind? Why would a person not mind their own business?
Cause they know that. No, let me stop.
Because they don't have a business to mind.
Exactly.
Ooh, yeah.
You got nothing going for
No DBA.
yourself. You got nothing going for yourself.
And it's not that you can't. And here's an interesting part. It's not that you can't.
You choose not to.
It's not that they don't have the capability, the willingness, or the ability to do it. But the problem is they would rather be an employee in every facet of their lives. Now I can understand being an employee at a job because you got to take care of your family. Because
Mm-hmm.
as an employee, you're minding your
Your
boss's
business.
business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But those of you on the sideline that's throwing stones, hope you break your wrist.
So if you can, I can understand you being an employee at your job because you got to take care of your family.
Yeah, we're not
But why are
talking
you
about
being an
that.
employee in every other? Why are you being an employee in every other facet of your life?
Mm-hmm. Okay, on your employment side, where you bring your capital in, all right, you're an employee. So something else in your life be the innovator of. I don't care what it is.
Wouldn't your community be your business because it's the community that you live in?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't
You
it be more advantageous to be a participant and a innovator in your community than a spectator
mm-hmm.
on virtual reality, aka the internet?
You know me, I don't mind going there. How many of you, and this not pointing fingers or bashing, but this is real questions. How many of us have been to our community meetings? Come on now. How many of us go to these neighborhood meetings that they have every month? Some of them are twice a month. How many of us show up and participate? I mean, this is where we have to start being honest. You cannot expect things to change while sitting on your butt. I'm gonna say it again. You cannot expect things to change if you're sitting on your butt. Cause and effect. What are you going to cause to affect change? I'm going to say it again. What are you going to cause to affect change? Besides wearing down couch cushions and beating up keyboards.
It's a good question. Our community is our business.
Facts. And if we'd have been minding our
So
communities, a lot of this, not all of it, we could have cut back some of this foolishness. And I'm not talking about the 1800s. We could have started minding our business in the 70s and 80s and 90s, early 2000s.
Free says, don't be a mental voluntary slave.
There you go. You don't gotta force me to do nothing. Don't worry. You ain't gotta raise your voice. I got you. I'm just gonna go over here and just do it. Voluntarily do it for you. Give me the peanuts. It's okay.
So, I mean, this is a question that we need to be asking ourselves and our communities
Mm-hmm.
and the people whose chats that we are on.
Mm-hmm. If you put garbage in,
And and
you're gonna
and,
get
and
garbage out.
you're gonna get garbage out. And I am not by any stretch of the imagination asking that you do it in the chat.
No.
All these back chats that people create, that's where those questions need to get asked. Because I'm not about putting people's laundry out in I guess in this type of public forum.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that stuff can be answered. That stuff can be answered in a private conversation.
Mm-hmm. Let's address these
It ain't
issues as
about
men and women. We're grown here.
yeah, it ain't about right. It ain't about calling nobody out. But at the end of the day, the questions need to be asked. What are you doing? What's going on in your community? What are you doing in your community to help your community? Does anybody in your community know that you're an Indian?
Again.
Because those are people that know you. And if they
Mm-hmm.
don't know you, why don't they know you? What and who are you hiding from?
And
And
on
these are questions that only you can answer. Go ahead,
mm-hmm.
Bones.
Now I was about to say on that note, it's been another great, great rising show. Any closing remarks?
As I always say, do your genealogy, find your family tree, tie your family tree to the land in your tribe. If you want to help your tribe, are you serious about helping your tribe? Let us know and we'll help your tribe. And if you think I'm lying, try me. It's that simple. I relinquish the mic.
Any closing remarks? No sellout.
Check us out on our website. Email us if you got any questions. Have a great day, y'all.
All right. And well, today we started the American Revolutionary War. Tomorrow we'll pick back up on the tribes that we didn't get to go into and give you some history on. It's been fun as always with the relatives in the rising. So until tomorrow rising, peace.